I heard a story a number of years ago about a preacher who went to his appointment for his first time to preach. Did I leave you out? You're after me. Okay. I didn't want to leave you out. This order is a little different from what I'm used to, so I wasn't sure whether I had left Monica out in her solo or not. I didn't want to do that. But this young preacher went to his appointment first Sunday. Nervous jitters that are always there whenever you stand before a congregation. And this was a little country church. And he had worked on his sermon. I mean, he had worked and worked and worked. He wanted this thing to be just perfect for his new congregation. And so the time came for him to preach, and he stood up behind his pulpit, and his mind went absolutely blank. The only thing that he could remember was that his preaching instructor back at seminary had said, well, if you ever get in a situation where you lose track of what's going on, said, if you can just remember a few words of what it is to say and say those out loud, then that'll help you to get back on track. And so he looked down and he saw on the bulletin that the title of his sermon was, Behold, I Come. And so that was his words. Behold, I come. Nothing came to mind. So he repeated it a second time. Behold, I come. Still nothing. And finally, the third time, he says, Behold, I come. The little church he was in had a small pulpit. The chancel area was no further from the front seat in the front pew than, well, from here to that modesty rail there in the front. And he said it with such force that he knocked the pulpit over, he stumbled, he fell, and he goes rolling down in the floor, and he lands with his lap in the head in the lap of the matriarch of the church. And he can't think of enough words to apologize to this dear lady. She says, well, preacher, you got nothing to apologize for. You told me 3 times you were coming. Jesus has told us a number of times that he's coming. The difference is it may not be a laughing matter. These were hard teachings that he was sharing with his disciples here. Like the last couple of sermons, he was trying to help folks get priorities in order. And what he says here is really difficult, particularly in the Western mindset of things anyway. It was difficult in the Eastern mindset at the time he shared it. I'm sure there were those in the crowd who were just simply scratching their heads saying, what in the world is he asking of us? But he starts out with words of assurance. Don't be afraid, little flock, for it's the Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. That's good news. He makes it clear when it comes to our inclusion in God's kingdom, God really wants us to be a part of it. He's doing a lot to make that possible for us. But Well, there is no but. God does want us to be a part of his kingdom. There are some things, however, that we can do that will be difficult for us to do, particularly if we are a disciple of Jesus Christ, and he outlines some of those for us. He says, your way of thinking is going to become radically different. To start with, sell what you have. Sell your possessions and give alms. Make purses for yourselves that do not wear out, an unfailing treasure in heaven where no thief comes near, no moth destroys. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Really? Sell my possessions? That's radical. Well, some find this way of thinking more frightening than the thought of the Father excluding them from their kingdom. In other words, their treasures are so important, such a priority in their life, that the very thought of selling their possessions and giving alms is, whoa. That's a lot to ask. The size of one's bank account, the financial portfolio, the size of the personal nest egg, and one's sense of financial security at all costs have become very important to our way of life. Some have, in fact, made it so important that they're so busy making a living that they fail to make a life. What could be more important than kingdom living? Well, the corrective for the life focused on the temporal things of this world, Jesus advocates as a radical one. Sell your possession, give alms, make purses for yourselves that do not wear out, unfailing into heaven. There you don't have to worry about anybody breaking in and stealing them. They're not going to decay or rust or get burned up in a fire or whatever could destroy it somewhere. It's something that lasts, not just for a little while, temporal, but for eternity. I don't know how long eternity is, but it sounds to me like an awfully long time. Sell my possessions and give alms. When it comes to selling our possessions, it's a truly difficult teaching, and perhaps the need to sell possessions is something to do really with the fact that there is a fine line between owning possessions and having possessions own us. The more we have, the more it takes in the way of time and resources and energy and financial obligations, etc., in order for those things to be maintained and kept and held on to. Not to mention the fact that we're very much attracted to consumerism in our world. Well, after you sell possessions, then you're to give alms. What on earth are alms? Well, in the Jewish tradition, it literally means righteousness. It means doing that which is right and just. Doing that which will enable another to become self-sufficient, or better yet, God-sufficient, dependent. When it comes to the place where we understand that all that we have and that all that we are is the result of God's blessings, the way that we best can express this love towards God and to our neighbor is seeking to do what is right and just in God's sight. An example of this for the Jewish farmers were that they were not to harvest the corners of their fields when they harvested their crops. They were to leave that for those who were in need of food and sustenance. I call it gleaning. Some of you may have been involved in gleaning projects from time to time. They offer them for people to go out into the fields where farmers will allow people to go and to glean the crops. I know sometimes the food banks are the benefactors of that. Every year at annual conference, they have what they call a potato drop, where they've gone out and collected potatoes and they bring them there and drop them in the parking lot, and people go out in the parking lot with bags and bag them up, and then they take them then to the local food bank to be used. Gleaning, doing that which is right. And those of you here who have participated in the USDA feeding and hungry ministries are, in essence, participating in an act of almsgiving on behalf of the church. Well, those that Jesus instructs his disciples to do, those things that he tells them to do, like making purses for yourselves that don't wear out, unveiling in the heavens where no thief comes or destroys. Remember where your treasure is, because that's where your heart will be also. If we're not careful, we might interpret this as that our heart will be also. If you're not careful, you may say that Jesus' call to action participates in the works of righteousness. In other words, you're doing something to try to earn your way into heaven, and the truth is none of us can do that. A lot of times people do. They attempt to anyway. But there's nothing you or I can do to ever earn our way into God's kingdom. There's nothing that we can ever do to earn our salvation. It's a gift. It's a gift that was purchased with an extremely high price. It's a free gift, but it's not cheap in the context of what God has done to purchase it for us. Treasures such as those that are laid aside in heaven cannot be taken from us, and because of God's graciousness towards us, they shall remain. This is most vividly expressed in the knowledge that even while we are yet sinners, Christ died for us, proving God's love for us. Where our treasures are, our heart is also. So if we know this, what's going to be our response? Well, according to Jesus, he says, well, we're to be dressed for action. We're to be prepared to do these things. We're to be ready as you would be ready for the bridegroom coming back following the wedding, and be ready to open the door when he comes, whether it's in the middle of the night, early morning, whatever time it is, to be ready to receive. Because he will see that we are concerned about who he is and what he is doing. I've heard it said before that if we get involved with what God's doing, God will get involved with what we're doing. In new and perhaps powerful ways. So we're to be dressed and have our lamps lit. and be ready for him whenever he chooses to come, because, surprise, he is coming at an hour that we think not. And there shall be blessings for those who are found faithful whenever Christ does return. So today, as we gather at the Lord's table, let us remember it's He who serves us this tiny foretaste of the heavenly banquet that's being prepared for us. He serves us with His love and His grace. And we can take to heart His call for a radical new lifestyle and begin to live as one of His recreated, transformed disciples. But know this, brothers and sisters, if the owner of the house had known at what hour the thief was coming, he would not have let his house be broken into. And so we too must be ready. For the Son of Man is coming at an hour we do not expect. Are you ready? Are you prepared? Are you looking forward to that? And may the grace of God fill us with the love and the joy of the kingdom that God freely gives out of His love. So be it. Amen.